you can transform people.
Yeah.
And I believe that because I've been in the audience.
Right.
I have transformed. So people that say, oh, steak sizzle, like, oh, keynotes are all sizzle, Paul, like, where's the real impact? I think that's totally false, because my life has changed because of being in the right room, the right place, the right time, right message. But here's the important part. I was ready to hear it. I was ready to act on it. One of the questions that I get asked in a more of a curious way is, so what does breaking the needle mean, and this and that? And then also the other thing that people care about a lot is they love your repositioning on, instead of asking yourself, what do you love to do? Asking yourself, what do you hate not doing? That part, way before, like, that was more, I think, from our podcast, but regardless, the fact it's in there, that resonates with people.
Yeah.
Like when I sense that people like me suffer from that shiny squirrel syndrome.
Right.
You know, like,
Yeah.
that was my problem in, what year are we in? 23. My problem in 22, my results, like scoreboard wise, they were okay. I wasn't stoked about it. I was a little frustrated, and I read Essentialism at the end of last year.
Oh, nice.
Diluted focus, diluted results, man. I was chasing too many shiny squirrels.
Yeah.
And I didn't make my ecosystem talk to each other. Like pod was in a vacuum and speaking's in a vacuum. And that you open that, it's like the community's in there, the podcast is in there, like everything's in there. So it's like if one does well, the others, because now they're connected. So I made my ecosystem talk. So I took breaks. Like I didn't do my pod for 7-8 months.
Oh, really?
I took a break. Oh yeah. I
Interesting.
retired. I sunsetted Playmakers.
Yeah.
Which is the one you were on. And it's the same, it's a different name, but it's the same type of show. But yeah, I had to step away because I was like, this is not serving me. It's not serving my ecosystem, and I'm leaving impact on the table.
Right.
And it's a good show.
Yeah.
But it's not essentially positioned right now. And
So it was like more of a distraction? Or it just wasn't, like you said, it just wasn't serving you?
It was, the benefits were all isolated to the podcast.
Okay.
Meaning, like, the people that consume the podcast weren't consuming other things I was doing, and vice versa. So I was like, there's a better way to do this where now everything talks to each other.
Yeah.
You know? And part of it was I wasn't done writing the book yet. And I said, okay, well, if I'm featuring a lot of folks that I had on the podcast and I'm shining a light on them for a couple pages here and there, what if I could include now that the reason I know them is the podcast, and therefore people that consume Better Decisions Faster are like, hey, there's a show that can keep the learning going.
Yeah.
And so that's an example that's very concrete, that now it's like the podcast drives the book drives the podcast.
Right.
But I needed some of those synergies. Otherwise, I felt like I was building 5 different businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get it.
Now I'm like, I focus on 2.
Yeah.
But it drives 5 revenue streams, as an example.
Yeah. So are you doing the podcast now again?
Yeah.
You started it back up again.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you do the podcast, the main goal is to get people to read the book? Or, I mean, you said 5 revenue streams. Maybe that was hypothetical, but like...
Yeah. No. Good question. So no, the podcast is really just a matter of driving folks to the community.
Okay.
The Win Monday community. That's why it's the Win Monday podcast. So again, it's all, this was part of it.
Oh, so you renamed the podcast.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
So now the brand is there, and now there's this Halo brand, and then within it, there's a community, there's a podcast, there's going to be a masterclass, there's going to be group coaching, there's going to be, so this entire empire of impact will be built in the next 2 years. Some of it will launch Q1, Q2 of this coming year, eventually public facing events, retreats, masterminds, all the stuff that it might take a couple of years, but at least now, like, the chessboard is laid out.
Yeah.
Versus before, it was like one checker move at a time.
Right.
Yeah.
So in applying, what you talk about in Better Decisions Faster, how'd you decide to stop the podcast and then to rename it?
Well, the stopping was exactly what I said, where when it started to feel like some of the benefits were isolated, and they weren't impacting the ecosystem.
So it wasn't a hard decision?
No.
Okay. So it was just like, so you didn't even have to.
No head hard. Well, because for me, I think with business a lot, we think so much with our heads that, like, when I thought about, okay, my heart said keep the podcast going because of the impact and it's bettering people, and the DMs and the
Right.
texts and the emails about, hey brother, this is helping.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, my heart says keep going with the podcast,
Mm.
but my head said the business impact isn't there.
Gotcha.
So because the heart was on board, it was the good yellow light. And good yellows, it's a stay in the fight, and it's usually a timing issue.
Yeah.
So I never said goodbye to the podcast. I just said, I'll see you soon, but I got to reconfigure what the game looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll welcome you back. And now it's going to be much more, now it's going to make head sense as well. Because
Yeah.
I never had to convince the heart.
Yeah.
The people telling you that the show is changing their life,
Yeah.
that's heart.
Yeah.
But now I was like, okay, start listening to this guy. And this said, something's off, take a pause, focus on what's essential, which for me last year was speaking in the book. And then when I focused on what's essential, I said, how can the podcast get integrated
Right.
into what's essential?
Yeah.
And that's when it started to make head sense.
Yeah. And then was it a no-brainer to name it Win Monday?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So the backstory of this was, as you know, a lot of people waste Mondays.
Yeah.
And I was reminded of that by a former boss so I was a young sales guy working at the hospitality group, which is, you sell the fancy white tents at golf courses and the Super Bowl and the Olympics and like all the stuff. So I'm doing that. And our call numbers, the revenue metrics, the dashboard, Monday was shit. Like Monday was just out. And so he flies in from the UK where the parent company was from. And, we were young sales guys. So we were just doing our thing. And, he comes in and basically put a truth bomb on us and said, look, I can be overseas, but I could see what's happening. Y'all are enjoying your weekends a little too much.
Yeah.
And he said, you're wasting Mondays. And let me give you some framework. All right, I know here in America, you take 2 weeks off a year. So you're going to work about 50 Mondays in a year. And if we now dive into the month, you're going to work about 20 overall days in a month. So if you're wasting 50 days a year, you're wasting 2.5 months
Wow.
of
Yeah.
production, of
Yeah.
performance,
Jeez.
and of revenue, of impact, of all that stuff. And so when he put it like that, I was like, well, I don't want to waste Mondays.
Mm.
What if I could flip that and start to win Mondays? And it became a separation season for me because everybody around me, nobody had that aha moment. And I started to then connect it to, all right, if we're going to call it a separation season, when else do people take their foot off the gas pedal? And we know this, and at the time we're recording this, we're knocking on the door.
Yep.
November, December, a lot of people take their foot off the gas.
Yeah.
And my message is I'm not one of those like, oh, 10x your life, 10x. I'm not that guy.
Right.
But I'm the guy that's like, you don't need to take your foot off the gas. Just stay consistent.
Yeah.
Whatever you would have done in September, whatever you would have done in March, do that
Right.
in November, December. Take the days that you need, but don't take 60 days off.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So November, December is a separation season. And the same way I think about that, separation season can be every Monday if you choose to win it versus waste it.
Mm.
And so that's why I want to surround myself with like-minded, like-hearted people. Let me find a community and build a tribe,
Yeah.
really build a community. And a podcast is one way to express it and connect it. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a tribe of people that don't want to waste Mondays. And while the world is saying, thank God it's Friday, we're going to attack Monday.
Yeah.
That's it.
So how do you prioritize all the things you have going now? So you have the books, you have
Yeah.
the podcast, you have speaking. What else? You have coaching.
So that's another thing. I don't do one-on-one coaching anymore.
Okay, drop that.
Yeah.
When did you stop doing that?
End of 22. When I read Essentialism is when I either gave things up or I put them on pause.
Okay.
Podcast was a pause.
Yeah.
Something like coaching. I said, it just doesn't scale. And I mean that in a lot of ways. Time, energy, bandwidth, resources, even the impact. Like the impact I felt was great, but it was also one of those things where as speaking, I identified the most essential thing. And I said, the Trojan horse of not only the business model, but of the impact ecosystem is going to be speaking. And that's the part that I feel called to.
Yeah.
So for me to speak more, there were certain things that were creating friction. Tougher to execute on the road, tougher to find the time to do. Also, it just doesn't pencil well if you're building a business. So for me,
So coaching was taking up a lot of bandwidth for you.
and it wasn't just executing the coaching. It was the mental capacity of building the coaching business. So I have a sales background and I just thought about where are my energies going? And the more that things in life like family and having a new kiddo and like understanding, wanting to be a great husband, also wanting to hang more with my friends and the people that warm up my life, and like all these priorities that are critical. And as I started to kind of pull, I felt like I was getting pulled in 8 different directions, but then I started to realize I'm pulling myself in all those directions.
Yeah.
It's not even other people. Like I'm
Right.
doing it to myself
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
And here's the problem. And you know this, Jay, because when you're successful and you're busy climbing and growing and building and developing and evolving, the world thinks you're doing it right because all
Right.
they see is the outside.
Yeah.
But you probably have had some friction on the inside or
Sure.
some tension where you're like, something's off.
Mm-hmm.
But the world is saying bravo, so it's hard to change.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
really hard to change when A, people are applauding, and B, like you're feeding your family, you're taking care of people.
Yeah.
But there's this internal thing that things could be better and they're not optimized.
Yeah.
And so when I read Essentialism, that's really what it got me to do was, all right, Paul, if you're going to be about speaking, then what right now in the ecosystem is creating friction for you to not execute your calling at the highest possible level? So I went into 23 and I said, only 2 things matter. And if it doesn't serve one of these 2 things, I'm out. And it was speaking and the book, Better Decisions Faster.
Wow.
That was it. I'm going into 24 now, and it's speaking and building the Win Monday community. That's it. If it falls out of scope, out of bounds, then I'm just not going to do it. But I wasn't thinking that way until a year and change ago.
Yeah. Interesting. And so what did your coaching business look like in terms of building it, in terms of actually coaching the people? What were kind of the X's and O's how did that look on a daily basis? And because I'm just trying to get like why, what the decision was to get rid of it.
For sure. Well, for one, I started to think about, as they say, do you cast a wide net or do you fish deep? And one of the beauties of speaking for me is always like getting to cast a wide net because, I do it, a lot of my backstory, but to share it right now, a lot of my inspiration comes from my late father.
Yeah.
And so he was a continuation school teacher. And so those are kids that have been given up on. And the hope and prayer is that they don't go on to become a statistic on the street.
Right.
Well, what happens with that is, I bump into some of his former students years after he passes. I lost him when I was 19 years old. So I'm in my 20s, still pretty young. And I remember a couple of his former students saying things like that my dad was the first person that ever believed in them. And my dad gave them a reason to think that tomorrow is worth it. And when you hear things like that, and you realize that that's how you can touch a life, and that's my scoreboard, and that's my measurement of success. And if you ask me if this podcast conversation was worthwhile, I'll say, did I make my dad proud? And if the answer is yes, then hell yes, right? I would do this every single day. And that's when I started to kind of align it to a higher purpose and a higher sense of impact, that I started to think to myself, whether it's something technical, like do you continue to coach or not? I just started to think about the ways that I was impacting people. And am I, quote, leaving impact on the table the way it's currently set up? And that's where the future of coaching for me looks like. I should be able to find a happy medium where I can cast a wider net. I can say, all right, whether that's a group coaching model, whether it's hosting my own events, that's where I want to get to. Right. Eventually, it's not just going to be go speak on the road and go take the corporate check. It's going to be, hey, the Win Monday community is such a massive tribe, which will take years to build. And I'm playing the long game, and that's great. But now I feel like the same impact that I was doing one person at a time in my past, I can get back to that, but it just needs to be more scalable.
Gotcha.
Because, for me, like, this is all holistic life, right? And we think about, am I drifting on default or am I living and operating by design? And it just felt like a lot of these things, like, here's the reality of it. If I'm being like brutally honest, I think a big part of, I got massive impact out of coaching and I felt great purpose because I'm helping people find their why. I'm helping people get aligned, like their why, their values, their decisions, their actions. And I'm creating this massive level of a purposeful game plan. But there was some part of me that said, if you're only doing it for one person at a time, it felt a little selfish for me to build it that way. I really felt like, look, if I can execute this at scale,
I get it.
Then the legacy piece is going to be stronger and I'm going to make him even prouder. So these are hard decisions. not a hard decision to make. I think it's a hard decision to be disciplined toward and
Yes.
committed toward.
Yeah. Did you have clients that had been with you for a long time where it was a little challenging, like to tell them, hey, we're not doing this anymore? And I don't know, what was it like a 90-day thing, or would you take on clients for a year? Did you have clients for years? Because I'm imagining myself, I have some one-on-one clients that have been with me for years, and if I told them today, hey, man, we're not doing this anymore, I'd be like, you know?
Yeah, and I think the right thing to do is I built the runway. This wasn't a December 31st, I'll see you later, January 1st.
Sure.
But even with a runway, it was tough. And my normal models were either 3, 6, or 9 month commitments. And
Okay.
so, but there were many clients that I worked with for years. And here's the reality. Because I was doing so many other things, I wasn't coaching so many people that I could still absorb a few of those grandfathered relationships and feel whole.
Yeah.
But I also understood, like, does this individual need it, want it? What do they need? What did they hire me for? What's the ongoing value that I'm going to drive? And frankly, I just took a lot of those relationships offline, and I just said, look, like, we do it in a certain way right now. I've always been and like, this is why, like, my business coach, he says, oh, you shouldn't do it this way. But like, for me, if I'm in, then I'm in. If I'm going to coach you, then I'm going to coach you. And I'm not a transactional guy. I'm not going to run this on an hourly basis. Like,
Right.
Paul's in your life.
Yeah.
So you're a high growth founder, you're a Fortune CEO, you're an Olympian, you're an NFL athlete. Like, I'm on speed dial.
Yeah.
And some business coaches say that's a bad business model, but for me, that's the fuel, that's the oxygen, that's
Same.
making
That's
them
the
proud.
only way I like to do it.
Yeah, like, you're in.
Yeah.
Like you're not hiring me for an hour. You're hiring me to be your partner
Right.
in this journey of life.
Yep.
And we're gonna figure out where we can plug some holes. But where I'm going with this is I still help people.
Yeah.
And so those clients that I would have had a tough exit from, they still call me.
Yeah.
It's not as often, but now they realize, like, all right, just having me in their corner, that's enough.
Right. Yeah. And so is the Win Monday community, explain what that is. Is that like a free thing now, or is it a paid thing, or what is it?
It's both.
Okay.
It's both. Where the baseline for me is, for me to be able to build a business where eventually you're hosting your own events and casting a wide net, obviously there's got to be a low barrier to entry. So for me, Win Monday is kind of a like-minded, like-hearted group. It's a come one, come all. And it's as simple as, hey, whether you're consuming the podcast, whether you're signing up for the newsletter, there's some push content. We built a lot of stuff on the back end inside of Mighty Networks that it's kind of an on-demand aspect of. The vision is this is going to be the Netflix of personal growth and professional development.
Nice.
So it's a plug and play piece that it's a baseline and it's a simple exchange of, hey, information for access. Great. That's the baseline. But then, of course, and you know this, some folks want a little bit more of an exclusive relationship. They want a higher tier experience. They want more premium access. And that's where the one-to-one, or that's where the masterminds, or that's where the offsite retreats, that's where the more intimate experience and all that stuff is being developed right now. But
Gotcha.
2024 is the year to launch all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're going to do your own events in 2024? Is that the plan? Or?
Plan is Q4.
Okay.
Yeah. Plan is if we're trigger ready, then if the audience is there, then that's going to be it.
And what do those look like in your head?
That's bigger than Paul. That is me, frankly, reaching out to people like you, folks that I know that we're philosophically aligned, and also we're diverse in our expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So I would never claim like if I said, okay, if you could synthesize as succinct as possible, what are you an expert in? How would you describe that to somebody that doesn't know you?
I mean, I would start with just fitness. It's the
Fitness.
easiest. Yeah.
Great. That's not, I'm not a fitness expert.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. But knowing that that's a part of the holistic plan that we're looking to put together.
Yeah.
So the way I describe Win Monday, it's about work-life mastery. And so who can help you master your fitness? Who can help you master your relationships?
Right.
Who can help you master your finances? Who can help you master? And we keep on going.
Yeah.
So with that, I would call in the relationships that I have and folks like yourself. And it would be a full day program, maybe a multi-day. We'll see how it goes. But I think we can get a lot in to say, like, it's a combination of not just keynotes, but also there's some workshop elements to this. Like, we got to put this stuff in action, right?
Yep.
Like, this isn't just about inspiration. Like I always say, when I step on a stage, there's 3 components. There's inspire, educate, transform. And my belief is every single event should do all three.
Yeah.
So the content is the education. The inspiration, the Latin definition, is to breathe life into. So is Jay breathing life into the Win Monday community? Is Paul doing the same? And the transformation is current state to optimize future state. And I believe that in a single day, you can transform people.
Yeah.
And I believe that because I've been in the audience.
Right.
I have transformed. So people that say, oh, steak sizzle, like, oh, keynotes are all sizzle, Paul, like, where's the real impact? I think that's totally false. Because my life has changed because of being in the right room, the right place, the right time, right message. But here's the important part. I was ready to hear it. I was ready to act on it.
Yeah.
You got to meet people
Huge.
at the 50, right? Like
Yep.
Jay can crush it on stage.
Right.
It means nothing.
Yeah.
If the person doesn't meet you at the 50, nothing. So you got to crush it to take those fence sitters, because there's some people that it's going to be the perfect message.
Yeah.
They're in.
Uh-huh.
They're in. There's going to be some people it doesn't resonate with. Okay, you got to accept that.
Yep.
But then there's those fence sitters that if Jay brings it and you're kind of pulling them in, that's where I think the real juice can happen. And yeah, man, I mean, I think that's
Those are
really
the
what
best, because you probably had that. I've had people come up to
Yeah.
me after a talk and say, I don't know if I was really going to be into this. And it completely changed my whole day
Yeah.
or my whole life, whatever, you know?
Yeah, I think those needle movers.
That's great. I love
That's the juice. But that's what Win Monday's all about, man. It's bringing folks in that are going to attack work-life mastery from a different angle, different expertise, and not only inspire, but the transformation, you have to get tactical.
Yep.
There has to be action planning. There have to be commitments that are made. There have to be resources that are shared after the fact, because that's really where the work starts. Like when I was at the Niners and I went to that life-changing retreat, don't get me wrong, the day was impactful. Actually, it was a 2-day experience. It was really impactful. But I don't know if anybody else's life changed the way mine did. The reason my life changed wasn't because of what happened in the room those 2 days. That just got me to take the first step. But then I made mental commitments on my drive home from the retreat.
Yeah.
That next Monday morning, Win Monday, I had to get tactical. I had to start sharing it with other people. That way they would hold me accountable. Like all this stuff. None of this is groundbreaking information, but just to say, like, you got to practice what you preach.
Yep.
And I don't believe that Paul or Jay in a single experience on stage are going to get people to the finish line of transformation. I believe we can kickstart people's journey towards transformation, and they got to then carry the baton. But for me, the community, the cool thing is you also have to stay top of mind, because life is so distracting and overwhelming, and there's so many pressures and expectations that if you don't have something or someone to consistently remind you to keep winning, to keep staying positive, to keep gritty, to keep resilient, to stay adaptable, to stay agile, to make better decisions faster, whatever it is, I believe that that's why we exist. We're there to just be that shoulder or that person on somebody's shoulder that says, like, just stay in the fight.
Yeah.
The fight's not supposed to be easy.
Yeah.
But that's why guys like Jay and Paul exist.
I love that. And everybody needs that. I'm sure you've had the experience. I'm friends with or work with a lot of high performing people, and I think the perception is they never need that. We all need that. They like people. If I name their names, they'll be like, "Oh, I think that guy's invincible. He's superhuman. He doesn't need that." Everybody needs that. Everybody struggles in some way or another.
Everybody not only struggles, I would actually say the highest performers and highest achievers in the world have more help and more support because they're confident enough to say, I'm not going to go at this alone. Like guys in the NFL, they're not short on gifts and talents.
Right.
They're not short on skills and abilities. That's not their separator. Congrats. Like me as a speaker, I think so many speakers, so many thought leaders, they think that their secret sauce is how good they are on stage. It's bullshit. That just means you're a major league speaker. That's not my separator. My separator is the work in the unseen hours. My separator is the relationships with the people that make more of these opportunities possible. My gift got me the ticket to the room.
Yeah.
Right? The reason I'm major league. So I think going back to what you said, hiring coaches, and there's many ways to hire them. You can hire them in different areas of your life. Here's how I boil it down. If there's an area of your life that you feel is important, you shouldn't do it alone.
I love that.
You shouldn't.
Right.
So if I'm after fitness, Jay's my guy. People come to Paul for confidence. People come to Paul for now. There's this entrepreneurial angle that wouldn't have been relevant before, but people come to me for leadership and sales. Like those two elements were, dude, I cut my teeth for decades. It happened to be in the NFL and NBA, but leadership and sales, like I can go all day. Like I can create programs for years.
Yeah.
And so much of it is just intuitive and it's real time. And that's where this type of relationship adds massive value. So like, here's real examples. I've got a speaking coach. I've got a writing coach. I've got a personal brand coach.
Wow.
At one point in my life, I had a podcast coach. Like, ask me an area of life that's important. Guess what? In the next 3 months, I'm probably going to bring somebody into my orbit that has built a community bigger, faster, and stronger than what I'm looking to build.
Yeah.
And then eventually I'm going to say, all right, give me the playbook. And then I'm going to, of course, make it authentic to me. But I'm not trying to do this alone.
Yeah.
I want to go faster. I want to do it better. And so, like, I just think, like, hiring coaches, like, pure investment.
Yeah.
And more than money. More than money.
Sure.
Like, for me, it's just the humility and the confidence. I think those are the winners, man. Like, the winners I've been hanging out with lately, they live at the intersection of humility and confidence.
Yeah.
And I think without one of those two things, you're not going to hire a coach.
Right.
Because confidence is the opposite of vulnerability. Oh, I need a coach. Oh, I feel weak. I feel vulnerable. Like people associated with something like even therapy. I'm like, I personally have never gone to a therapist, but God bless you if you needed it and you did. That's strength.
Yeah.
That's not vulnerable. That's strength. Good for you. Keep going as long as it's helping you. You do you. So the confidence piece is the opposite of vulnerability. And then I think the humility piece, again, if you think you have all the answers, you're dead wrong.
Yeah.
Like I was just hanging out with Gary Ridge. He's now recently retired, but he built WD-40. Like he was a CEO and chairman for decades. And they're known to have one of the best cultures in the world. And I could say, oh gosh, like okay. you pop into WD-40 and as unsexy as the product can be, you're like, dude, yeah, it fixes a squeak. It's a can, right? Yeah. But dude, their people love working there.
Really?
They love being there. Huh. And Gary shared this really cool insight. He says, my whole leadership career, non-WD-40 leaders, I go to these CEO forums and these World Economic Forums and everybody acts as if they have all the answers. He says, my superpower was 3 words. I don't know. He says, I figured out the right environments and situations and people to say, I don't know in front of. He's like, whether I thought I knew or not. I said, I don't know because it made me human. It made people trust me. I listened. I didn't jump in. I let people take action, even if it was imperfect. And I said, well, we don't have failure here. They're learning moments. So now he's a consultant. No shock. His company is called Learning Moments because his whole philosophy is you succeed or you learn. You succeed or you grow. You succeed or you adapt. You succeed or you evolve. And if that's the case, well, failure is just a non-existent thing.
Yeah.
It literally does. Failure means I never chose to get up and I never chose to learn. If you're learning, then you can never fail. And it was guys like Gary that impressed that upon me. And so I just try to share that out now.
Yeah. What does a normal day or week look like for you work-wise? Or is there no normal?
Yeah, it's a great question. I separate my life in 2 buckets, on the road and at home.
And how often are you typically on the road during a normal year?
So like, let's say 50 events a year.
Okay.
50 events. And it's very logical to be like, oh, it's 1 a week. It's very spring and fall heavy, but regardless, like let's call it 50 events. And each one you're on the road for a couple days, right? Yeah. So let's call it 100 days on the road, just to use round numbers. Here's a cool thing. And then I'll get back to a typical day. I think it's really important to call this out. I'm equally stoked to get on both planes.
Equally. That's great. Love that.
Equally, dude. Like, awesome. There's a gig in Orlando. Okay. I'm fired up, bro.
Yeah.
Fired up.
Yeah.
Can't wait. But guess what, dude? I am equally ecstatic to get back to the fam. Like, it's like, awesome. I'm just like firing on both cylinders. Yeah. So for everyone listening in, I think that is a massive gut check.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an audit that you want to do. And if it's not a plane, it's a commute. If it's not a commute, because now home studios, right? It's like, hey, you're in the shower getting ready for another day. How are you like, it's just it's an authenticity test,
Yeah.
I think. So anyways, I think that's a very important caveat to say you should be equally fired up to say, I'm going to go attack my work and I'm going to go attack my life.
Yeah.
And that's work-life integration, right? When you can really think about that.
Yeah. There's so many things I love about that. But as men, we tend to default to work and career first.
For sure.
Yeah. And so for you to say that you're equally fired up, I think that's, honestly, I think amongst high-performing men, that's probably unusual.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh, in my sports days, I think the over-index was, regardless of which one you were stoked about more, it was very rarely a 50-50.
Yeah.
But here's the reality. I still do over-index on work, but the catch is I found something I feel called to do. So if I was collecting a paycheck, I don't have the right philosophy. Right? If you don't love what you do,
yeah,
that's not a winning game plan.
Yep.
But for me, I'm like, all right, I found exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I know why I do it. I would fall on the sword for the impact that it creates. I'm making my hero proud. Talked about my pops, right? I feel like there's a legacy component that, as a new dad of a couple years now and soon to be welcoming in number 2, like, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. And I eventually want to make this a part of the lifestyle. Hey, you get a gig in Bali, like, kiddos are coming, dude. I'm yanking them from school. So future teachers, listen to this right now. Like,
Yeah.
like, this is happening, dude. Like,
Yeah.
because this is life, and that's integration. So when I say, like, I don't count the hours, I think that work-life balance thing is a fallacy and it's just a total myth. But if you believe in harmony and integration between work and life, I think not only as men, but like as high performers, high achievers on either side, yeah, like society tells you that work is critical, especially here in the US. And I don't disagree with that. And you got to be honest with yourself. If you're not going to change the mindset that you want to have, here's my simple question. Forget work. But if you're going to work a minimum of 8 hours, let's call it 8, 10, or 12 hours. Some people grind it out for 14 plus. Okay, 8 to 14 is a range. If you're telling me, Paul, non-negotiable, you're going to do something for 8 to 14 hours a day, then I'm going to say make it count.
Yeah.
Make it count. And that something happens to be work. So I have a choice. Do I want that number to fuel me or drain me?
Right.
To energize me or deplete me? And because I chose fuel and energy from work, then when sports stopped doing that for me, that's when I knew I had to make a move. I loved the industry. I didn't love the day-to-day.
Yeah.
One of my coaches in my MBA program, she asked me, actually, very cool question that I'll share with our audience. She said, you're the head of sales for the 49ers. That's your job. Answer 3 questions. What do you love about it? What do you hate about it? And what do you tolerate? So love, hate, tolerate. And I answered all 3. And she said, go deeper on that love bucket. I said, all right. I love the people side. I love the culture side. I love being a coach just like you. And she said, great. On a good day, what percentage of your time do you do that? And that's when I started to slouch down in the chair.
Wow.
And I answered, my ego puffed it up a little bit. I told her 20%. The truth was probably about 10%. So I said, her name's Sue Ann. I said, Sue Ann, 20%. And she said, okay, if I waved a wand and you became your boss tomorrow, would that number 20% go up, down, or sideways? And I thought about it, and my boss was almost all strategy, no people. So I was like, I think it'd go down. And this was the question that changed everything for me. She said, so what are you after? And Jay, it's such a simple question, but it can have such profound meaning if you're ready to hear it. I hadn't thought what I was after for the better part of a decade.
Yeah.
I was just busy winning and climbing and succeeding and getting trophies. And the fact that it was in a sexy industry made it even better. But I totally lost touch with, why am I climbing this ladder? Is it leaning against the right wall? Is this still the right ladder for me? And when I started to process those questions, that's what leads to the eventual Jerry Maguire leap. But it started through the power of a coach. She changed my life.
Right.
She asked me very simple and timely questions, and I was ready to make decisions and take actions because of it.
Wow. Wow. I got goose. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. What a great story. But you didn't answer the original question. On a weekly basis, what do things look like for you in terms of what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So you asked day to day.
50,
So I'll
50
give
weeks
you,
on the year.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, on the road.
Yep. So typical day. I'll start with the road because that's a little bit more plug and play. Here's the cool thing, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but this is just how I roll. I'm so all into speaking, and I care so much about the craft. When I'm on the road, meaning I don't do anything else. Like I don't do podcasts on the road. I don't do any coaching on the road. I don't do anything. I am locked in.
Yeah.
If I have a 7 p.m. engagement, like I am in my hotel room for the majority of the day, and I'm focusing on either practice and or my health. Like that's it.
Yeah.
I don't do anything else. I don't take calls. Like I protect my voice.
Yeah.
I do all the small things
Yeah.
that any professional would do. I am all in. Look, I'm not knocking it, but I know speakers that are the exact opposite. Like fly in, fly out, like, do that whole thing, and they're just booking their calendar solid until they have the AV check an hour before a gig. God bless them. Like you do you. That's just not me, because mentally I think about the person in row 20, seat 8. And if I don't max out my impact on that person, then I'm going to regret the things that distracted me during the day. And if I showed up at 95%, I am wired to beat myself up for the 5%. I'm wired that way. So I want to live without regret. And my way of not having regret is just to go all in and burn the boats and say, if this is my calling, then nothing else gets in the way. Nothing else.
Amazing. I love that. Wow.
And then the other part too is, here's another differentiator.
So from the time you land, that is it. You're maximizing your sleep, all the thing. I love that. Wow.
Look, I've been around pro athletes most of my career.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people know this, but let's say, okay, I worked for the 49ers. When they have a game on Sunday afternoon at home, at Levi Stadium, they don't sleep at home on Saturday.
Right.
They're in a hotel.
Yeah.
Why? Lock in.
Yeah.
So I'm an athlete. I'm a performer.
Right.
You got to lock in.
Yeah.
And so that's what I do.
Yeah.
And here's the other differentiator that I understand, and not everybody has the same superpower, but I think the same type of intentionality can apply. A lot of speakers, after the gig, they want to get the first flight out.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm trying to get a sense of the entire agenda, the entire run of show. And if I know that there's a reception after the time that I talk, 9 out of 10 times, short of me having a gig in a different city the next day, I'm staying.
Yeah, same.
I'm staying because it's a really interesting piece, Jay. I've gone to countless receptions the night before a gig and then the night of the gig. And it's really different. The night before, like people just look right past you, even if they know you're the speaker, or they ask you the question that it gets a little annoying sometimes. They say, oh, so what are you going to speak about? And you're like, oh my God, dude, if I freaking tell you, then I'm taking the air out. But if I don't tell you, now I'm so anyways.
It's the worst.
It's the worst, dude. It's the worst. So I don't love the night before.
Right.
Plus, I was taught by a good friend of mine. She's a fellow speaker. She crushes it. Climbed Everest, ton of other things. Her name's Allison Levine. And she has a saying to meeting planners. She says, when I get invited to the evening reception the night before, knowing I have a morning keynote, she says, you can have me for one or the other. Which do you want? And knowing she's one of the top speakers in the world, what do you think they say? So she's like, I have not gone to an evening reception in over a decade the night before. Because, again, I think that's boundaries and parameters, right? Good for her.
That's great.
Okay, the reason I go after is because I'm a relationship guy.
Yep.
And I've got a sales background. And after you talk and after you genuinely touch somebody's heart, sometimes their soul, and they sense that my life is different because of being in that audience, dude, it's like a rock star moment. But rock star not in an ego sense. I mean rock star, you're like, this is why it's my calling.
Right.
Like when there's 1,000 people in an audience and then 20 wait to talk to you after, I love all 1,000, but I do it for the 20.
Yeah.
And those 20 will find you at the reception after. So A, it's giving me future motivation, fuel, and oxygen to keep going. As
Yep.
physically exhausted as I am, that's the juice.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part is it makes business sense. Because if 20 people come up to you after, 5 of them are CEOs of companies, sounds like you got yourself 5 potential new gigs. So it checks all the boxes. It checks the emotional box. It checks the heart box, the head box, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's a typical day on the road.
Real quick,
go ahead.
Because I'm obsessed with this kind of stuff. Do you do anything? You talked about maximizing your sleep. Do anything like nutrition-wise or supplement-wise to kind of be energized or focused? Do you use any nootropics and anything like that?
Yeah, good question. Look, I'm a keep it simple guy, and I almost wish I had your same gift here. But well, for one, let me lead off by saying this: I've lost almost 25 pounds this year. Okay,
Nice.
it's been the healthiest year of my life.
Nice.
And if I'm being completely vulnerable about this, a little bit of it was last year, as I was putting together a lot of my new speaker promotional assets and videos, and I was watching myself on film, and I didn't love how I looked.
Okay.
Like I wasn't proud. Remember like this whole like make my dad proud, and like not that he would care about 10 pounds here or there. It wasn't about the number. I just know the decisions that went into that look. It was this compounding effect of not making better decisions faster in my health. And I realized that I wasn't always practicing what I preach. Not that I'm a health and wellness speaker, not that I'm a fitness speaker. What I mean by this is I always share with folks that if you want to win in life, you've got to be able to delay gratification.
Yeah.
Big believer in that. Paul wasn't always practicing that when it came to food and beverage.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm just giving a funny, but like real example. Like, hey, Paul, great. Yeah. 6-hour flight from New York to LA and a client took care of business class. Amazing, right? You don't have to guzzle wine the whole way home.
Yeah.
But a couple years ago, I might have.
Yeah.
And so like, it sounds like a small thing, and I'm not beating myself up over doing it once, but I realized it was the compounding effect of decisions like that. Right. So you think about elements like that. To answer your question about health, though, part of my transformation, it was a combination of intermittent fasting, which I'm sure a lot of our folks in the audience do, just getting down to basics, like something like athletic greens being some fuel for me on the road. Because, again, on the road, it's really tough to be healthy when it comes to food and bev options. Introducing electrolytes into my life and really just kind of like being – just focusing on hydration and just really like kind of that aspect of my health. And anything besides that, like I just created some boundaries and rules about like, look, these are the things that I eat or don't eat. I don't snack anymore, which as a dad of a 1 or 2 year old, it's really hard. Like I found myself reflecting back, Jay, and I'm like, why the hell am I finishing my kid's grilled cheese? Before him, I didn't have a grilled cheese for 20 years. It's not that I like a grilled cheese, but I'm finishing it every night that I'm home.
Right.
So the compounding effect of decisions like that.
Yeah.
Again, it's not about one time. It's just, hey, am I being intentional? I was just lacking intentionality in my health, and now that I'm intentional, I know that I can be disciplined, and I know that I like process, and as a result, I've lost 20, 25 pounds, and it's great.
It's awesome. Do you notice a difference in your cognitive function, your mood, and your energy?
Yes. Not as much I've always felt very dialed in when I need to be on.
Okay.
But my recovery, the morning after,
Got you. Yeah.
the lack of fog, the ability to have 2, 3, 4 good days in a row versus a good day, an okay day, a great day, an okay day. Like in sports terms, I don't have losing streaks anymore.
Yeah.
If I ever have a bad day in terms of the way I feel, even like right now, and it's just like, hey, weather changing and hey, a little plugged up or whatever it is, I promise you, whatever it is, like tomorrow I'm dialed, tomorrow I'm good.
Yeah.
And also like, so not only the ability to recover, the ability to just kind of like play through it. But I kid you not, man, I haven't had, and this is saying a lot when you've got a little kid at home, I haven't been sick in years.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, I just power through, dude. And like, it just is what it is. And also,
I think there's so much to that though. The mental.
I was just going to, thank you, dude. I was just going to say that. And she knows that I talk about this, but it's not about throwing her under the bus. I think this is just like a realistic statement. I'm talking about my other half and like, we always talk about mindset, and I get it. Like, look, if I was married to an inspirational speaker, there's some part that, like, she's just like, dude, I listen to him all the time. People are like, have you read his book? She's like, not yet. And they're like, what? You're married to him? She's like, I live with him.
Right,
Like,
right.
so
Yeah.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
But where I'm going with this is that I convinced my mind that I'm not going to get sick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I tell myself, like, even again, right now, I feel probably 80 or 90%, but I'm like, cool. Like, it ain't going to go lower. It ain't going to go lower.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going, dude. I'm going to go, and I'm not going to drop. And like, so far the track record is I don't drop.
Yeah.
Versus I know other people that it's like, oh shoot, I'm getting sick. And it's like, bam, 24 hours. They're on their deathbed. I'm like, I think saying something like you brought this on yourself is too harsh and too strong, but I'm also like, I think you made it possible.
Yep. I agree.
I'm not saying you're sick because of that, but like your energy, your mindset, like I think everything is connected. And I just convinced myself, like, dude, I ain't going to do it.
Exact same. It's funny because when I got here, Will said the same thing. You're saying it about whatever's going on with the weather or whatever
I
right
feel
now.
plugged up. It's all good. Yeah.
And so someone said to me yesterday, they were like, oh, what, are you getting sick? I go, no, I don't get sick. It just didn't occur to me, right? I was like, no, I'll be fine. And they're like, oh, maybe you should stay. I was like, I'm fine. You know, like you just have to have that mindset. It is a total game changer, I think.
Yeah, and you know this too. Like, are you a believer? I'll share with you what I'm doing health related in 2024 that I'm super stoked about. But are you a believer that like do you do big events as far as like whether it's, I mean, like you could think of very common things, right? Like, oh, a Spartan race, or like I just signed up for the 29029, that whole thing, like kind of the
What is that?
It's the Jesse Itzler group of the climbing the peaks. Like, do you believe that like putting big things on the calendar, like, do you subscribe to that?
Yeah. Yep.
So I never had, because again, up until a year ago, I wouldn't describe health as a top priority of mine. I was just drifting on default, right? I wasn't unhealthy, but I was just on default, doing whatever was comfortable. Now, I met a group of guys, one of which is, he's the CEO of my publishing group, and a couple other fellow speakers and community builders, and just guys that I think the world of. And I found like a really cool niche and tribe of guys. And we just committed a few days ago to go do this. It's in September. So at the time we're filming this, it's like, I don't know, 10, 11 months away, whatever that is, but it's a date on the calendar. And here's the important takeaway for everyone listening in. And it's tough to say this as a sales guy by background, because I was taught to think that goals will drive your life. Set a goal and put a plan together and you'll achieve it. And I've hit 90% of goals that I've ever set out, whether business related or other related. So I'm very proud of that. But I noticed a trend, and I noticed a trend that the more that I accomplished goals, the less they started to become meaningful to me. And it was often because it wasn't even my goal. So as an example, if you work for a company, if you're not an entrepreneur, you plug into a bigger machine. If a company says the revenue quota is $1 million and you achieve $1 million, you could be proud, but I promise you within a day or so, like, the magic is gone.
Yeah.
Because it was never really your goal.
Right.
Like, it's somebody else's goal.
Right.
And so that's an example. Or if you're making goals exclusively from your head, not from your heart, those goals over time are going to lack purpose. So I've now subscribed to a different philosophy. I subscribe to this philosophy of standards over goals. Standards over goals.
I love that.
And an example of this, not only has it led to my health transformation, because I made some standards for myself there. On my business, I created some standards, and my revenue this year surpassed all of last year by mid-April.
Wow.
So by mid-April of this year, I had exceeded revenue of last year.
Wow.
And here was my process. My standard was driven by my strongest core value, which is impact. I probably have said it 200 times already in this conversation, and it's not by accident.
Right.
I'm hardwired for impact. My definition of impact is making a difference. The way that I measure that, am I leaving people and places better than I found them? My why behind that is to make my dad proud. So it's all tied up to bigger purpose. Now, I said, okay, Paul, if you're going to be a man of impact, create a process, create a system, because a revenue goal is no longer getting you out of bed. Even as an entrepreneur, yeah, I care about revenue to keep the lights on and feed the family. But at the end of the day, like, it's arbitrary.
Yeah.
Like, Jay, like, oh, what's your podcast going to generate this year? $1 million, $2 million, $5 million? Like, It's arbitrary.
Yeah.
And so I have found that we're leaving fuel on the table if we're solely driven by that goal. So what I did, I said, okay, I'm going to create a standards related process driven by my strongest core value of impact. And here's what it was: plant 5 impact seeds in a day. And not only plant them in a day, but do it before the household gets up. So now everybody, now it's controllable. 7 a.m. family wakes up. I wake up at 4. From 4 to 7 a.m., starting in January of 2023, I started planting 5 impact seeds a day. Set up calls, texts, emails. If somebody, I believe we can create more impact together, there is a conversation to be had. I did the outreach. And as soon as they would get back in touch, bam, like it was this compounding effect of human connection driven by impact seeds.
Yeah.
5 a day, no days off.
Wow.
And by late
Amazing.
January, the results started to come in. And in between late January and middle of April, exceeded all revenue from the prior year.
That is amazing.
Just by that simple process.
Wow. So can you give, I mean, you don't have to name any people or whatever, but like kind of a somewhat specific example of what 1 or 2 of those impact seeds would look like. So you wake up at 4 and what are some of the things you're doing specifically?
Yeah, I think the usual suspects are you're thinking about past clients, current clients, relationships of folks that swim in similar lanes, guys like you, like, and again, like Jay, it's less about, oh, Paul is trying to sell something to Jay. I think this is like, hey, can Paul and Jay create more impact together? Hey, Jay, been thinking about you, bud. Heard you're moving back to LA. Love to collaborate on some pods or whatever. This is impact, right?
Right.
And over time, maybe the amplification of this episode, and one person hears it and says, dude, I loved you on Jay's show.
Yeah.
And as a result, maybe it does lead to something. So you just have to trust the process.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of a framework. Here's another framework that I'll share with folks. And you don't need to be an author for this to work. But I like creating boundaries of, if I'm going to have a process, I like knowing who the universe is going to be. So in a book launch year, my personal brand coach told me this. He said, create a 100 by 100 list. And what that means is create a list of 100 people that you think have the capability of buying 100 books. And so for anybody listening in, we all have a network. Some can be more robust, some can be more professional, some can be more personal, all good. But based on the standards you have, or maybe the goals that you have, create a list of people that can help you accomplish that goal. And so this 100 by 100 list became 100 people that I can now plant impact seeds with.
Yeah.
And the crazy part is, now that I've distanced myself from executing this months ago, the majority didn't buy the books. But it created a process that led to the right conversations. And it probably led to 10 stages. Well, again, my long-term goal is not to sell books. My long-term goal is to drive impact on stage. So if that's the case, creating this list and a process like impact seeds led to those results.
I love that. So let's talk. We were talking a little bit before we went on the air. This is the second book. Share some of what you were talking about, like how it's going now and how you're kind of reacting and responding to it and where your mind is.
Yeah, I told you 2 words off camera that I'll share now on camera. And I said, I'm at peace. At peace. Peace of mind, peace of heart. You know, I'm very comfortable with the process of how the launch went. Results, killing it.
Yeah.
In the first month of the second book, exceeded what my first book did in the first year.
That's amazing.
So,
and I will say for those listening, you know how to throw a party for sure. A book launch party. That was amazing.
Yeah.
At SoFi, Ed Sheeran. That was a great time. Thank you again for that.
Of course. No, it's phenomenal having you there. And I think that's part of being at peace, right? Is like, this felt like the human connection element of it was like, you know, who are the people that have inspired me along the way? You're one of them. Who are the people that have helped uplift me, believed in me? And, you know, you think about a party like that, book launch party, SoFi Stadium, Ed Sheeran.
Let me just interject
Yeah,
and
go
tell
ahead.
the
Go
audience real
ahead.
quick. It was funny because you invited me to the party, and I was all in. I wanted to be there and support you, and I was happy to be invited. And a few days before, this was probably, I don't remember how you didn't tell me that there was going to be any concert, right? And then a few days before, you go, "Hey, do you want to stay for the concert?" And I go, "Yeah, sure." And I figured your friend John or Jenny was going to come in and just play acoustic guitar in the suite, right? I was like,
Oh
"Yeah,
my
sure,
gosh,
all right, whatever."
that's hilarious.
And then you send me and it says Ed Sheeran. I was like, "Whoa, this guy really knows how to do it right." It was crazy.
Yeah, no, but here's the and well, part of that, and I didn't do it intentionally, but you're not the only person that has given me feedback like that. But 2020 hindsight, I would say, like, we were joking when people showed up. I was like, yeah, you get a little Ed Sheeran on the side of Paul Epstein, right? But
Yeah.
like, it was tongue in cheek. But basically, it's like you want people to show up for the right reason.
Right.
First, hey, you want to come to a concert? Hey, by the way, I'm going to sign some books before. Like, nah,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, a little different. But here's the cool thing. I think a lot of folks would have access to an environment like that, which for me was, hey, I've done a lot of favors for a lot of people over 15 years in the NFL and NBA. There's a lot of folks that wanted to help. And one of my buddies who's a big hitter at SoFi Stadium's like, dude, this would be an honor and a pleasure to roll out a red carpet for the most important people in your life. And like, literally, that's pretty much how he said it.
Wow.
So obviously for me, it's like extending that gratitude and invitations to guys like you. But here's the cool thing though. I think there's a lot of people that, let's say you do have access to that. So immediately your mind goes to business. Like, because this is a book launch party and a book is a part of your business. And therefore, if I have 50 tickets to the suite, let me invite my top 50 business relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do that. There was some business for sure, half. But then the other half were, who are the people that have helped me become the best version of myself? I'll give two examples that are off the radar. One showed, and the other, if it wasn't for being out of state, would have 100% been there. But I'm very proud. These two invites embody why I'm at peace with the process. One was my personal trainer. Her name's Annette. She trains me every week as long as I'm not on the road, and even when
How
I'm
long
on the
have you been
road.
working with her?
Oh, since my transformation started, that was a commitment I made. It was Q1 of 23. So let's call it, yeah. I mean, less than a year, and the results were almost immediate. But needless to say,
How many days a week do you train?
with her, 2.
Okay. And then on your own a few other days?
Yes, I would say out of 7 days, here's a cool stat to share with you. I probably go back and forth. Let's say my average is 4 times exercising a week.
Okay.
You know how many times I was exercising before I got in shape? 6 to 7.
Really?
More.
Huh.
But I wasn't watching what I consume. And like, again, I'm talking to the expert here. I'm not saying this to like,
Yeah.
I'm saying this because I've realized the formula that works for my body.
Yeah.
It's not just running an hour a day
Sure.
and putting bad crap in your, that wasn't working obviously, but I didn't know. I'm like, well, just jog it off. Like, no.
Yeah.
But I needed to learn my
Sure.
own way. Right. And so
We still got to get a workout in one day.
yes, we
yeah,
do.
yeah.
Yes, we do. So Annette was invited. Also, my driver. And before making this sound like a big foo-foo, like, oh, Paul's got a driver, I'll explain the backstory because it's all part of it. And these beads, I know on audio you can't see, but I have some beads around my wrist. My driver made me these beads. Here's the quick backstory. Post-COVID, when the world started opening back up, and look, I get a lot of 6 a.m. flights out of LAX. It was really hard to get an Uber. You know, like 3, 4 a.m. Like, man, like you're getting canceled. You're getting like, there's not a lot of supply out there. So finally, I got lucky, found a guy, and he was very nice. I enjoyed my conversation with him. Just chill, car, nice, Audi SUV, whatever. And I was like, hey, do you always work at this time? And he said, yeah. I was like, hey, do you do side stuff? Yeah, he does. Great. So we just built a relationship, and now we're texting, and he ends up being my guy. But that's how it started. Point being, I then realized that, ever since he came into my life, like I was enjoying my conversations to the airport more. I showed up on the plane with better energy. I showed up with even better energy once I landed. So I asked him some questions, and he basically got me, or he told me that he does a lot of work or he studies kind of this sense of energy based on your top 3 goals and when you were born. And he's like, I've been making bracelets and beads and everything for people for over a decade, and I just do it for good fortune, good luck, because as long as I'm going to be driving people, I want to make their lives better.
Yeah.
And he really cares about his clients.
Amazing.
So anyways, it was working. And this is now my 2nd or 3rd bracelet with him. And literally he gets down to day you were born, time of day, top 3 goals. So is it health? Is it finance? Is it what? And so when I told him, hey, I'm launching a book this year, he said, okay, well, this is the lucky year of number 8. And I said, okay, well, what does that mean? He said, so if September is going to be your book launch month, you have to launch your book either September the 8th or in 2 numbers that add up to 8. So your options are September 8, September 17, or September 26.
Huh.
We were together the weekend leading up to my big launch day, September 26th. I chose the book launch day because of my driver.
That's amazing.
So,
Wow.
I mean, like, it seems random, but dude, I'm telling you, but getting back to the genesis of my trainer, she allowed me to become the healthiest version of myself. My driver bringing me good energy and conversation and feeling alive when I'm going out there to better the lives of others. I don't take these things for granted. I don't think they're small things. I think they're a part of a bigger organic way of living, to say, like, I'm intentional, man. Like, when I come across people that do good and they feel good and it feels right, like, I don't lose those people in my life, man, because it's not normal for me to extend that invite to them. But I want, if that's what normal is, and I don't want to be normal, and I think sometimes we need to disrupt what society says we should do with these once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. Like, how many books are you going to launch? You got to maximize your invites, and a business manager would have said it's stupid, and I would have said, maybe you're stupid. Like, no. You're just telling me to do what an MBA program could have taught me. I'm trying to be happy. I'm trying to be fulfilled. I'm trying to make my dad proud. I'm doing it for way bigger reasons than selling a book.
I love it. Let's talk a little bit more about what is in the book, though. I mean, just the title is like a superpower, right? Like, if anyone could make better decisions faster, your life would be better. You'd be more successful in every kind of realm of your life. So let's talk first. Let's start with the head plus heart hands decision. Equation.
Yeah. Well, here's what's really cool. And I'll share a little backstory with you. Actually, I'll explain the equation and then remind me to circle back with me on a question to say, Paul, what was the first sign when you knew that the book would be successful? And it was probably a year and a half before. And it was, I'll give you a tease. It was because of a drunken moment at a conference. So let's come back to that, okay? And I was not the one that was drunk, which makes the story a lot better. Okay, so if you write a book like Better Decisions Faster, awesome title, but
it is a great title. It's such a good title. Yeah.
Like, in 3 words, you're like, dude, I know exactly what this is all about, right?
Amazing.
But if you stop there, like, hey, buddy, you should make better decisions faster. Or, hey, honey, make better decisions faster. Or, hey, team, let's make better decisions faster. It's just not enough.
Right.
Like, it's kind of a, well, yeah.
Of course.
But how? So I wanted to be a part of the solution of how. Because as I started to do the research, the average adult makes 35,000 decisions in a day.
It's insane.
Think about that. If you're listening into this, you are going to make 35,000 decisions today.
It's crazy.
And then a new 35,000 tomorrow, and so on. Now, I didn't write the book for all 35,000, but that opened my eyes to what I call MVD. So in sports, you have most valuable players, MVPs. Your MVDs are your most valuable decisions. So there are those handful a day that have significant value, consequence. There's more weight on your shoulders. But with that weight comes pressure, comes expectations, comes stress, comes anxiety. And there's a reason why there's terms like paralysis by analysis, or if you're a leader, decision fatigue, decision overwhelm. And all those factors that I just described lead to the worst decision of them all, which is
indecision.
Yeah. Indecision is a silent killer. 100%. And so when I started to realize how big of a problem it is to even swing the bat, to make the decision, and in our higher stakes moments, we struggle even more so, I said, there's got to be a better way. But here's ultimately also what convinced me that this was the book to write. let's do an audit. I mean, you're a fitness guy. So if I put that in kind of the greater health space, show me the quality of your health decisions. I'll show you the quality of your health.
Right.
Show me the quality of your financial decisions. I'll show you the quality of your portfolio. Like, show me the quality of your career decisions. I'll show you the quality of your growth. Like, whatever it is, show me the quality of your decisions. I will show you the quality of your life.
Yeah.
Period. Yep. Point blank. That's it. So nobody disagrees with that. They're like, yeah, dude, compounding good decisions leads to a compounding good quality of life. And the opposite is also true. So then what's your process? What's your system? You say decisions are the maker. Nobody doesn't want a better quality of life. So you know that better decisions are the key. So how do you make them? Well, my gut and impulse or the data and the... Actually, I don't have a process. What are you talking about? Is probably the most common answer I got. Right? Risk versus reward. Very rare. And I said, oh, so consistently, like do you have a process? And less than 5% did. And even the ones that did, it was wishy-washy. Like, it was nothing that was repeatable. It was nothing that was scalable. It was nothing that was shareable. It was a lot of gut. And I said, okay, well, the problem with gut is I can't coach that to others. And a lot of these were CEOs and leaders. So I said, well, it sounds like it's something that you can't scale through an organization. Okay, that's the backstory. So now that we've identified the problem of paralysis and indecision, and the big problem is, yeah, I want a higher quality life, but I don't have a process or system to make the types of decisions to more accurately lead to that higher quality of life. So I started to do an audit of my decisions, for better or worse. I made some great ones, made some bad ones, made a lot that were in the middle. I made some that felt authentic. I made some that gave me a lot of confidence and strength. I had other decisions that made me feel weak, made me feel like I sold out. Like just a variety, like a total gauntlet. And I was just very honest with myself. But then, knowing that I was going to write this book, I started to study other great decision makers, people that I consider of high confidence at those critical forks in the road. I then started to incorporate it into my podcast questions, into my coaching practice, into my training workshops, into my consulting. Literally every area of my business, I was auditing and asking people, tell me about the best decisions you've ever made.
Wow.
Tell me about the worst decisions you've ever made. And I was dissecting the themes and the patterns, because I didn't want this to just be about me. I wanted to make sure that it had the social test.
Right.
Okay, that's the entire backstory. So I realized that there's 3 components to making better decisions faster: head, heart, and hands. Head is our mindset. Heart is our authenticity. Hands are actions. So then the equation is head plus heart equals hands. In other words, when deciding whether to take action, whether to use your hands, there's 2 checkpoints: head and heart. Head, do I think it's a good idea? Heart, do I feel it's a good idea? And just like a traffic signal, you know exactly what to do when you drive up to an intersection. Green is go, red is stop, yellow is assess. That's how the equation works. When your head and heart are on board, it is a green freaking light. Go 10 out of 10 times. Take that action. Use your hands. When there's no head, no heart, it's a red light. Don't do it or stop doing it. And then when only your head or your heart is on board, that's a yellow light. And we got to solve for the gap. So Jay, I wrote Better Decisions Faster to inspire a life of more green lights. I wrote Better Decisions Faster to create the awareness in people to stop running reds.
Right.
And then I wrote Better Decisions Faster to finally have a playbook to navigate and conquer the messy middle of yellow. That's why I wrote Better Decisions Faster.
Yeah. Let's get into some real world examples.
Yep,
so talk about, I don't know, pick something off the top of your head and how you would use your head. And is it meant to be that you can make these decisions by yourself, or would I still be like, Paul, I should call Paul and get his feedback on that? Talk us through that a little bit.
For sure. So the whole goal here is, and actually, let me go to that funny story,
Okay.
and then let's come back to the question you just asked. Sometimes you get this gut feel as an author or a thought leader that, like, oh man, I think this is really going to resonate. Here's how I knew when I was ideating Head, Heart, Hands and Better Decisions Faster and Green, Yellow, Red. It was like a year and a half before the book ever came out. And I was teasing it at the end of my Playing Offense keynotes, which that was my talk for years before Better Decisions Faster. I would beta test this content in the last 5 minutes of that talk.
Okay.
And I remember being in Palm Springs. It was a big association event. And late night, the night that I was speaking, there was a big reception. And some of the attendees, they were enjoying their night, you know, a little marinated.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember they yelled at me as I was walking through the courtyard about to call it a night. And they said, hey, Paul, hey, Head, Heart, Hands, man. Green, yellow, red, man. Like, and it was like this kind of debauchery, drunken, like, you know, type of yelling.
Yeah.
But the fact that they remembered it,
Right.
I actually thought that was a big cue and a big signal.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, this stuck. And especially after some beverages, like, they remember this. They don't remember 80-90% of what I said.
Right.
But green, yellow, red, very familiar. And we like familiar.
Yep.
And familiar sticks.
Yeah.
Head, Heart, Hands, catchy. Power of 3. I like this. I can remember that. So I knew I was on to something. And that's why when I went all in on the equation and then the green, yellow, red connection, that has been not only a fun story for a year and a half ago, but more importantly for the month and change since the book came out. That's been one of the bigger pieces that's really been going there. So now let's double click on some real world examples. And you asked, should you do this alone or should you do this with other people? I will come back to that because I think there's a very important insight on that point. But
Okay.
I'll pick on some real world examples. For one, I think the one that needs the least explanation are green lights. You know when you know. Those are the hell yeses.
Yeah.
Head and heart is on board. Like, you don't need real world examples. That is a green light relationship. That is a green light job. That is a green light fill in the blank. Like, you know, when you are saying hell yes, that's not because only your head or heart is on board. That's because they're both on board. So greens, pretty simple. I'm just giving it a name to create more awareness so you can attack and seize more green lights. Okay. Red lights. Red lights are interesting because, Jay, and everyone listening in, there's a lot of problems going on in the world right now, but rather than dealing with the macro stuff, let's deal with the micro. Let's deal with our personal stuff that often one-to-one humans, we're just struggling right now. You'll hear things like, I'm burned out, I'm stuck, I'm fatigued. Or there's other people that we know that probably don't have a lot of hope or optimism or positivity. Maybe they're not happy. Maybe they're not fulfilled. So my question is, did these people, and maybe in some of the cases it's us, did we get to these states overnight? Of course we didn't. What happens is we've been running reds subconsciously for months or years.
Yeah.
And we ask ourselves, how did I get here?
Right.
So I wrote the book to create awareness to stop running reds because as a result, we'll be less stuck. We'll be less burned out. We'll be happier. We'll be more fulfilled. All the opposite states of what I just described is possible when you make a habit out of not running reds. But
Yeah.
subconsciously for months or years, the compounding effect of red lights gets us to those very dark places.
Right.
So that's a big one. Now, the majority of where I think folks, including myself, need the support in are yellow lights. Greens and reds are about awareness. You're aware of both. You want more of one. You should stop running the other. Done. Yellow lights, that's the messy middle. Those are much trickier. Here I will give a couple of examples. So I think there's a good yellow and a bad yellow. There's a yellow that you want to stay in the fight, and there's a yellow that can be more deadly than a red. Let's start with the bad one. The bad one, and I would ask everybody, which do you think can change more over time, your head or your heart? Like, I guess, Jay, in real time, I'll ask you, if I said, hey, Jay, what are the odds that you think your mindset can change over time? Or do you think in a week, in a month, you're going to wake up with a totally different heart set?
I would go mindset because, like yourself, I'm always working on that every day. I'm trying to get better.
Yeah.
And I don't think like I'm trying to improve my heart every day, right? It's like I'm trying to improve my mindset, my resilience, my grit, whatever it might be.
Totally. And if we defined heart as your truth and your authenticity, it's either true or it's not.
Yeah.
It's either authentic or it's not. That's nothing's going to change there.
Yeah.
But your mind can evolve and shift. And whether you're overcoming a self-limiting belief or whether you're talking to a coach, there's something that you can do to detoxify and get some pollution out of the head, or just overcome a hurdle or a barrier, right? Okay, most people agree with that. So my point is, if your heart is never going to change, like I'm not waking up with a new heart tomorrow, my truth today is not going to change in a month, then that yellow light where only my head is on board will never become a green. Never. My heart is never joining my head for the party.
Yeah.
So, an example, I used to run big sales teams, and often you have a top producer, top performer. They sell the most widgets in the company, but some of them pretty difficult to manage, a little toxic in the locker room. Not always, but it happens. So using head and heart, my head said, keep them. My heart knew they weren't a keeper.
Yeah.
I wanted the production. I wanted the performance. I had goals. I had pressure. I had the boss. We had quarterly numbers. We had shareholders we had to please. Keep them. And so as a result, they stick around. Months and years of this yellow light go by. And now your culture's all screwed up. Now you've got engagement problems. Now some of your better people are leaving because they don't want to be in that environment. So now you got retention problems. And then the marketplace starts hearing about this. Now you got recruiting problems. So when I consult in these environments, because it reminds me of the Paul of yesteryear, I say, you know, you don't have a recruiting problem, an engagement problem, or a retention problem. You have a yellow light problem.
Wow.
That's an example.
Yeah.
And that example can apply to relationships. Like your head, oh, stay with this person. Your heart knows. Are they your person or not? Stop bullshitting.
Right.
Stop.
Yeah.
Stop. It's either your person or it's not. You're lying to yourself to say that your heart is in.
Yeah.
Your head is convincing you for logical reasons to be in.
Yeah.
So that's why it's a bad yellow, because it will never become a green. And we're lying to ourselves if we think that it will. Now, a different way of thinking about yellows is what happens when your heart is in, but your head is not. And what I find here is it's often a byproduct of timing. And also these are the yellows that maybe you don't want to tackle alone. So to come back to your piece about, you know, is it a individual thing versus a team thing? So one of the darkest yellow lights I've ever been in was actually this good yellow. I mentioned how my dad was my hero, and me becoming a dad a couple years ago, all that I wanted was to be a hero to my little guy. But 6 months into it, I felt like the exact opposite. And my heart was in, but my head wasn't ready to be a dad. I missed my old life. I think I was focused more on what I lost versus what I gained. I didn't feel the emotional connection. My friends, especially the guys, told me it's going to be a Hallmark card, and the card never showed up. Like, oh, it's going to bring you all this joy. And I'm like, I'm losing sleep. It's impacting my work.
Yeah.
One of my podcast coaches at the time, literally I hosted one, and he was always very complimentary and gave me great feedback. And I remember ending a show and he said, Paul, what the hell was that? I was just hosting through a fog. I barely even remember the conversation. So it was negatively impacting my work, which when you think your work is your calling and you believe that, kind of pisses you off.
Yeah.
And again, I was never mad at the person. I was never mad at my little guy. I was just kind of frustrated with the situation because the storm feels permanent. And so that's the state that I found myself in. And so you can imagine as a guy and as just a human overall, because I think this happens on both sides. I'm just giving my dad's story. This could equally apply to moms, of course. But like my storm was a tremendous amount of guilt and shame. Like I felt like a bad person. And so I don't want to talk to anybody about this. So now you harbor it.
Yeah.
And it gets worse.
Yep.
And so for months, I kept this in. But then I felt like I hit this rock bottom moment where I was like between feeling the way I feel and opening up to my partner, who's my best friend and my rock and my soulmate, I was like, dude, I got to go talk to Myra. I have to. And it was scary.
Did you talk to any friends first? Like any male friends first?
No, because they all told me it was a Hallmark card.
Yeah.
And they all told me it was going to be roses and ponies and unicorns. So I did talk to them after, and I'll share how those conversations went in a second. But
after you spoke to Myra?
After I spoke to Myra. Yeah, so when I spoke to Myra, I was scared, man. I was like, dude, is she going to judge me as a husband, as a dad, as a person?
Yeah.
But again, my pain was so great that the lesser pain was talking to her because of the way I felt.
Right.
So here's her reaction. I went into all the color, told her exactly, raw truth. This is how I'm feeling. And she said, I've been waiting to have this conversation for months.
Wow.
She knew.
She knew.
She knew. She said, you haven't been yourself in, I can't even remember. And then she said this, we are going to get through this. She took a me problem and made it a we thing. And
Amazing.
you want to talk about green lights, bro. She was already a green light to me, but now you could add like 10 exclamation marks. Like now it's like, what? How powerful is that?
Yeah.
That as soon as she made me feel not judged and comfortable and just, okay, own this. And this is not supposed to be easy. And we're going to get through this. The yellow started to flicker green, right? Like all of a sudden being a dad wasn't so bad. But she then said, to get to your piece about friends, she said, have you talked to your buddies? I said, no. All of them told me it was a Hallmark card. You know, they told me this. I feel like the exact opposite. So like, I think it's a me problem. She's like, don't be a, and I'll leave the word out, but she was pretty colorful. She's like, don't be a, just call them. And I did. And one by one, they opened up to me after I opened up to them and said, yeah, dude, the first year was brutal for me.
Oh, man.
The first 2 years really sucked.
Wow.
I didn't feel connected to my kid till they were 3 or 4, whatever. And I'm like, dude, you told me it was a Hallmark card. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And that's, I think it speaks to a little bit of male vulnerability.
Sure.
So that's a whole piece there. But I think it's also like a little bit about shame too of, you know, we're all struggling with something and we just don't feel comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
So I needed this radical life chapter and shift and pivot to kind of shine a light on it. But that's why my message, when you have the good yellows of your heart being on board, you can recruit your head over time to join for the party, but you probably shouldn't always try to tackle them alone. My recommendation for a lot of the good yellows, because you're going to have a lot less of these yellows. It's very rare that your heart is all in on something. Very rare. So when you find something, don't screw it up. Whether it's a person, whether it's a chapter of life, whether it's the job, whether it's whatever it is. When your heart is in, you don't want to screw that up. And not all these yellows turn out to be greens, but they all have the potential to be green because you can work on your head. You can work on your mindset. And that's really where I wanted to impress upon people is like, I almost think the healthier way of looking at the head, heart, hands equation is leading from the heart.
Yeah.
Not because it's more important, but if it's not on board, you know it's never going to be on board. Why do I want to live a life of dead ends that don't lead to greens? I want to give myself a chance for greens. So if my whole life was green lights and good yellow lights, and I'm aware of the bad yellow, and I stop running reds, that's how you have a higher quality of life. But your heart is the ultimate check-in, and too many of us bypass it. It's become a forgotten art.
Yeah.
Right? So I always share with folks, lead from your heart because it's become a forgotten art. I really do believe that's the gap that we have in our life and in the world. A lot of the worldly problems, it's a lack of heart. A lot of the problems where we run into some really bad situations, we probably didn't check in with our heart, or we didn't listen to our heart's cues and signals. And that's why I think the head, heart, hands equation is so powerful. It gives us a framework to balance logic and emotion. Yeah, I prioritize one over the other, but you have to check in. It's head plus heart, not head minus heart, not heart minus head, not head or heart. This is head plus heart. So I think that's a massive, massive benefit. It gets emotional people to check in with their logic. It gets logical people to check in with their emotion. Otherwise, you can't possibly have a green.
Yeah. And so many people, you shared examples of it a couple times, maybe 3-4 times in this podcast, where business decisions, a lot of times your heart is saying, man, I really want to do that, or I don't want to do this anymore. I want to stop doing this. But your head is like, but it makes me the most money, or it's the best decision for my career, whatever. That's a challenging one. And I know a lot of people that struggle with that. I've struggled with that, where I'm like, I kind of don't want to do this anymore, but it's a huge source of income, you know?
Yeah.
And so in that instance, what would you say to someone?
Very natural. I still struggle with it. I still deal with it, especially as an entrepreneur. And again, money is money and resources are resources, and taking care of family and paying bills, it's a thing.
Yeah.
But here's the beauty of it. Using the head, heart, hands equation. Now, within seconds, you can identify your current situation as a green, yellow, or red. And again, within yellow, there's the good yellow and the bad yellow. Good is when your heart is in, and bad is when only your head is in. Okay, so we get to a color, ASAP. If I knew what you just said, Jay, so Paul's business or Jay's business, and we have the bad yellow light, there's this revenue stream, but our heart's just not in it.
Right.
But right now, it's 80% of our income.
Yeah.
Okay. Without head, heart, hands, you might just become unhappy, disgruntled, unfulfilled, all bad stuff over the long term. With it, now I just gave you a framework to identify it as a bad yellow. So you should start your action plan to eventually get out of the bad yellow. Not tomorrow. Got to put food on the table. But what are the daily actions that you're committing to, that you're prioritizing, that are creating a better tomorrow, a better next month, a better next year? If you're in a dead-end opportunity, or like hypothetically, and I know you love doing it, but let me just, poke the bear a little bit, like you love podcasting, right? Like, great, awesome. But what if it was the bad yellow? So I would say, like, if I was your coach, I would say, let's build a 2-year plan for you to no longer be a podcaster.
Okay.
Because ultimately, like, it's not fulfilling you. It's not driving you. It's not making you happy. This is a slow death, right? So I think that's kind of part of where we just need to be honest with ourselves about where we derive our energy from. I think the beauty of green, yellow, red is, like, it gives you an instant sense of awareness to be like, all right, greens and reds, I can get to the finish line really quick. And yellows, it illuminates what's possible. It illuminates the change that's going to be required for me to optimize my future state versus my current state.
Yeah.
That's what it does.
Yeah. I love get to do beats how to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I think gratitude, we always hear about things where, do a gratitude journal. And there's mixed feelings about that, right? Like, I think everybody agrees that it's a good thing and it's a positive thing. But I also believe, like, you want to meet people where they are. And a lot of folks that I run into, I don't know, it feels a little too head in the clouds, a little airy-fairy. So like what I said was, okay, you don't need to call it a gratitude journal. Frankly, I think you can journal any state of head or heart that you want just by creating a process. So I'll give 2 examples. To journal gratitude, here's what I love doing, Jay. Like, I don't like making things up out of thin air, meaning like, I'm grateful for, and then I like think about something kind of like altruistic, and it's like, no. Like, right. No. Here's what I do. I actually pull my phone out. So I'm already breaking a gratitude journal rule. Most people would be like, no tech. And I'm like, screw that, dude. Right. Like, I understand the power of what I have in my phone. So here's what I do. I'm a realist. I pull up my calendar and I create a practice. I say, all right, what do I get to do today? What do I get to do? And I'm not making it up. I'm basing it on something that is physically on the calendar. Here's what taught me this lesson. It was early pandemic, so we were still in an all virtual world. I had a buddy of mine that wanted me, he heads up sales for the Oakland Athletics, so Major League Baseball team. He says, Paul, I'm going to gather the sales team. We'll do it on Zoom. And can you talk to us about finding our why and living and leading with purpose and all this other stuff, right? So we do it. And it was great. And the guy, everyone was doing it from home. He sends me a note right after, like maybe about 10, 15 minutes after. And he says, Paul, A, great session. Awesome. I knew you would crush it. B, I just wanted to say from my heart, thank you, because I just had one of the most special moments in my life.
Whoa.
And he wasn't referring to the speech. What happened, Jay, is he had 2 kids that were home from school because, again, school was shut down at the time. He had a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, both boys. So his 2 sons were listening in, kind of eavesdropping to my talk.
Mm-hmm.
And after we were done, they both walked up to him and said, Dad, can we talk about our why? A 12 and 14-year-old that never
Wow.
would have heard my speech had
Right.
I done it at the stadium,
Yeah.
at the ballpark, never would have heard it.
Yep.
But the circumstances and the environment. So instead of, because full transparency, early pandemic, man, I was missing the in-person stuff. Like virtual wasn't
Absolutely.
quite hitting the
Yeah.
heart as much,
Yep.
right? So like instead of saying I have to do a webinar, I said I get to connect with these 20 amazing people. That instant of understanding the opportunity of what's possible when you do good work for a good mission, for good impact, for good contribution. And now I heard the story about my guys' sons and wanting to talk about why and purpose when they're pretty much teenagers. I was like, oh man, that's special.
Yeah.
So that taught me a permanent lesson. No longer should I look at something on my calendar as a have to do. I should look at the same thing on the calendar as a get to do.
I love it.
I get to spend time virtually with 20 awesome people versus I have to do another webinar.
Yeah.
It looks the same on your calendar.
Mm-hmm.
It's how are you? What's your lens and filter for it? So I think that's a great practice, right? The other one that I'll share, it's different from gratitude, but I still think that it ties into it. People always ask me, why am I so fired up? And yes, I'm wired in a very passion forward way, as I know you are too, Jay, but I actually am very intentional about injecting energy and excitement and passion into my life. So I have a process. Same thing. I look at my calendar and in the morning, if I journal, I ask myself, what is one thing that excites me today? So
Okay.
I look at the calendar, what excites me? And the very first time I ever did it, nothing on my calendar excited me. It's kind of a shitty feeling, you know? You're like, oh man. So anyways, nothing excited me. All right. But here was my rule, self-created rule. And now I coach it to others. I say, if the next morning, again, you look at your calendar and you ask yourself, what excites me? And still nothing does. The rule is, don't get out of your journaling chair until you put something on the calendar that does excite you.
Wow.
So I'm creating a hack. It's a rule where I will not go 2 days in a row without doing a minimum of one thing that excites me. And inevitably, you know this, kind of habit forming 101, like internalization, muscle memory will form. So if I'm doing something on Monday that excites me, and then it's going to trigger something for me to do something on Tuesday and then Wednesday.
Yeah.
But basically using a baseball analogy, like my batting percentage, it used to be like 500. My floor of excitement of, am I doing something today that excites me? My floor was 500, 50%. Then it became 60%, 70%. Now it's probably at 90, 95, close to 100% because I created the habit and the ritual.
Wow.
But it was started from a journaling practice. What is
Amazing.
one thing that does excite me? And I wouldn't get out of my journaling chair and have back-to-back days with a donut. Nothing.
Now that's amazing. And is that just business and career focused, or could it be just I'm gonna go surfing later?
Absolutely. Like, what's one thing that excites me? Like, I know this is going to contradict some of my health stuff, but like, I'll tell you, my favorite food is bacon. All right, great. You know what? What brings me joy? Dude, I'm gonna grill some bacon for me and little man today.
Okay.
Like, I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
He loves bacon. I'm like, yeah. Like, it's all good. Like, the point is, do something in the world. Whether it's a physical activity, it's a work activity, or it's just like being present, right? Like
Yeah.
just being like, hey, like sometimes you do need that glass of wine with your partner because you've been on the road for 10 days. And I'm like, we haven't had a quality conversation for weeks.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
That could be what excites me. Maybe I'm on the road and I say, oh, tomorrow, instead of getting home and crashing, tomorrow it's that glass of wine, which I know she'll appreciate, but it's that deeper connection to say like, I owe this to her and I'm excited about it. And that's why I'm so fired up to go home. And, you know, like it's just this beautiful, beautiful cycle. but you need processes. This stuff doesn't just happen by accident.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about being present and how powerful that is. And in the book, you talk about, which I always, the first time I heard it was my mom quoting Dale Carnegie, to be interesting, you have to be interested. And you talk about that a little bit. So talk about those two things, like being interested, being present, and how impactful that is in any relationship you're in.
Love it. And that segues into curiosity.
Yeah.
Curiosity, but it comes to, I'll actually share another personal story of how this connected me and my wife and took our relationship to an astronomical level. So I'll get back to that in a second.
Yeah, I wanted to tie curiosity in with that as well. My improv teacher named Rich uses ABC for improv scenes, always be curious. And I go, Rich, I'm going to steal that for life because like in a conversational setting.
Absolutely.
Yes, so powerful.
Oh my God. Like every single function. Oh my gosh. Business. Like you're going to another networking function. Hey, be the most interesting person. Be the most interesting. Be the most. And like you do it and you play the game and then you realize like it just feels inauthentic after a while. But now interested is, am I listening? Am I present? Do I have empathy? Am I asking questions versus just like jumping in, or I'm listening, but I'm not really listening. I'm just hearing. I'm focused on what I'm going to say next. That's not being interested. Okay. And so the cool thing is me as the why coach, me talking about purpose a lot. People always say, what's the fast path to purpose? And I say, there is none. That's the end state after two things: curiosity and then passion, and then comes purpose. So if you said, what are 10 things that I'm interested in? And you scratch 10 itches, and then eventually 2 of those 10 resonate more. So what's really cool is then you'll scratch 2 of the 10 and you'll realize that 1 of the 2 gravitates more. And then when you really lean into that and spend time in that, you have passion in it. And then basically you figure out, well, I've consistently felt passion about this thing or this person. Now you start to feel purpose. So purpose is just an end state, but it starts by, what are you curious about? In other words, what are you interested in? Then from curiosity, passions can be born. Then from the consistent application of doing things you're passionate about, you start to feel purpose.
Now, you are someone that like just radiates energy. You're always curious. You're always interested. You bring high energy. Is that something that someone can improve and get better at over time? And how intentional are you about that? Like, are there times where you're like, man, I just don't feel it today, but I'm going to turn it on?
100%. I believe any human trait or characteristic can be developed. I believe we can improve and evolve in all those areas, but it takes intentionality and it takes process.
Yeah.
So, hypothetically, you're lacking positivity, passion, or excitement in your life. Do the exercise that I said a couple minutes ago. Journal every day. What's one thing that I'm excited about?
Yeah, I love that. I'm starting that tomorrow. I love it.
Start it tomorrow. Think about that. If you're lacking positivity, passion, hope, optimism, whatever, if you're doing one thing a day that brings you those feelings and emotions that you want, that's compounding. You can't lose. So that's the thing. I think it's not enough to say, it's not enough to say, I want that. You have to create a process to do it. And going back a little bit to the power of being interested, you know, the backstory of even me and my wife, when I met her, she had just started law school. So I lived in New Orleans. She lived in LA. And it was 3 years of long distance.
Wow.
And we made a pact. That's
a long time.
We made a pact. Friday through Sunday, 3-day weekends, for 36 straight months, we saw each other.
Really?
3 days multiplied by those 36.
Damn.
So let's call that a little over 100 days of intentionality, of presence, of focus. We got more quality time.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
In those 100 days than living together for years.
Yeah.
Which for me has always been a reminder that it's not the quantity of time that matters. So, oh, Paul, you're on the road so much. And I am. And I am. And by the way, she's my biggest fan, my biggest supporter. She wouldn't want to be with the Paul that's not chasing his dream.
Right.
She wouldn't want to be with that Paul. So it's great, but it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And as the kids get older, it's only going to get harder. And I get that. But the point being, it's not about the quantity of time that I'm home. It's about literally being all in on not only what I'm doing in those moments, but paying attention to the cues and the signals. Do I forever want to get on that plane to go on the road? Am I equally excited to get on the plane to come home? And if either one is not a 10 out of 10, then I need to reassess.
Yeah. Yeah. My man, Paul, this is so great. I mean, like I said, I could talk to you all day. Book is amazing. Such a great job. Like I said, I wish I had this years earlier. I feel like it's a book I'm going to reread multiple times, almost like a reference guide for making decisions. So just let everybody know before we go where they could follow you, where they can find out more, where they can get the book, all those things.
Absolutely. So paulepsteinspeaks.com is the home. And of course, LinkedIn and Instagram are the two main socials to follow. Here's a cool gift that I want to share out with your entire community as well. So on my website, paulepsteinspeaks.com, main nav bar, you'll see confidence quiz. So a big through line, and really what I consider to be a superpower now, is confidence.
Yeah.
And I know that because I've had two chapters of life, pre-confidence and post-confidence.
Right. Same.
And we've bonded on that. My pre-confidence chapter, it wasn't that I lacked it. It's that it was inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
Good day, good week, bad week.
Right.
And now it's just such a constant in my life. And I believe that it's because I created these processes and systems. A lot of them are inside of the book, Better Decisions Faster, on how to make more confident decisions, how to take more confident actions, and how to inspire more confidence from the relationships in my life. So bottom line is, this quiz gets you to a data point, a confidence score of 1 to 100 in less than 5 minutes. And then knowing that confidence is a journey, it gives you a resource on how you can build and sustain unshakable confidence from that point forward. Because if I could leave everybody with this one thought, let's not think about confidence as a light switch where it's either on or off. That would either mean you're not confident or you're confident. I want to reposition confidence as a dimmer switch. +1, -1, +2, +3, +4. So whatever your quiz gets back to you, you're a 90, you're an 82, you're a 74, you're a 49. All that is your data point of today.
Yeah.
And like a dimmer switch, you can raise that up, +1, +2, +3, and hopefully not only the insight of where you score today, but more importantly, the resources that we share with you after. That's going to be the best way to stay connected and join. And, no better time to start than Monday. And that's why I started the Win Monday community. It's all about just building a tribe of people that have unshakable confidence.
Yeah.
That's it.
I love it. Thanks so much, brother.
Yeah, man.